esteemed gathering, Reverend Dr. Fox, there are a lot of theologians in American history, hundreds. But only a tiny percentage of those hundreds have had a voice reaching beyond American shores, American discourse rooms. Matthew Fox is in that rarefied atmosphere. Even more sharply, there are only a few theological schools or traditions afoot in the larger global history of Christianity that are American-born. Alongside the social gospel and church and society frameworks of Rauschenbusch and Reinhold Niebuhr, and the process, thought, and theology movement of Whitehead, Hartshorne, and Cobb, creation-centered theology with Matthew Fox stands with a tradition that now has been born in America and reaches out across the world. Matthew Fox has done more than any other modern theologian, reframing a positive role for what a human being is and for what the natural world and Christian theology is for the contemporary moment. The Reverend Dr. Fox began his professional religious scholarship career in the Roman Catholic tradition as a Dominican friar and a scholar, but he ran into challenges of becoming too popular for reframing doctrine, such as game-changing books as Original Blessing, a primer in Christian spirituality, The Coming of the Cosmic Christ, and Creation Spirituality, Liberating Gifts for the Peoples of the Earth. The price he paid was a particular special kind of attention given to him by the head of the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, the Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, who persistently attempted to silence Matthew Fox. And he especially objected to Fox's feminist theology, calling God Mother, for prioritizing the concept of original blessing over original sin, for working too closely with Native Americans in spirituality, for not condemning same-sex love, and for teaching four paths of creation spirituality: the via positiva, via negativa, via creativa, and then via transformativa, instead of the three classical paths of purgation, illumination, and union. So he faced persistent heresy investigations and finally walked out of the room and became an Episcopal priest. Since in his whole career, Reverend Dr. Fox has authored 35 books that have been translated into 68 languages and have sold millions upon millions of copies. This is his discourse in his tradition that has shaped a constructive and holistic approach to human nature and the creation in which the divine has put the human. Today, he prioritizes working with young people who are the future of this creation. And in addition to shaping creation spirituality as a theology, he works to reinvent forms of worship, especially with youth. His now becoming legendary Cosmic Mass has been celebrated in dozens of locales, and he spends much of each year conducting workshops and giving presentations around the world, such as this one tonight. Let us welcome Matthew Fox.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. Appreciated both presentations that have preceded me, and I appreciate the thought that went into that most recent one. Oops, that's my wrong glasses. So it seems to me that every gathering today should begin with the reminder from the United Nations and International Scientists last year that we as a species have, well, as of last year, 12 years left, now 11 and a half years left, to change our ways as a species. If the planet as we know it is going to carry on in its current manifestation. So clearly it seems to me this is the call of Mother Earth, it's the call of Gaia, it's the call of the Creator, that we undergo a profound awakening. And it's not technology that's going to save us. Technology has a role. But what awakens the human species in a short time? It is a spiritual awakening. The word in the Gospels that Jesus uses, metanoia, a change of consciousness. A getting over of our, what Pope Francis has rightly called our narcissism as a species. Our thinking that what we demand and what we require or think we require, that this is what existence is about, what the earth is about. It just isn't so. As was already mentioned by your president, interconnectivity is a habit of the universe that scientists are now talking about, but mystics have been talking about for thousands of years. And we are in this together with the air, with the waters, with the soil, with the animals, with the plants, with our ancestors, with the angels and the spirits. I was reminded during the first presentation by your president of a experience I had 20 years ago. A shaman told me, but today the four-legged ones are so worried about us two-legged ones that they're having conferences about us. Something like this conference, they're gathering and to talk about us. And one of their conclusions was that they should do two things differently. One, they should enter more fully into our dreams to wake us up. And secondly, those who are our pets should be more assertive. Check that out with your cat, your dog, your horse, your bike. Well, I ran into the same shaman 2 years ago. And I asked him, are the four-legged ones still having conferences about us, and are they still talking about us? He said, yes, they're still having conferences, but they're not talking about us anymore. They are shouting about us. They are shouting about us. That's Mother Earth, that's Gaia, awakening all who dwell in this very special planet. Now, I appreciated the biography that was just shared with you about my fun with the Vatican. There's one mistake. I did not walk away. I learned something from Rosa Parks. I made them kick me off the bus. I volunteered to leave the bus. I did not walk away. They kicked me out of the Dominican order after 34 years, Ratzinger did. So I just want to correct that one little detail. But I do want to point out this, that the Pope's encyclical Laudato Si, how many of you know that encyclical? It's a very good piece of work. Scientists love it. One scientist told me this year, it's the most important work on spirituality and the science of the earth and her survival that's ever been written. He said he was just ecstatic about it. And I like to point out that in fact there was a student of mine who wrote that encyclical, wrote 80% of it. A fellow from Ireland, actually, an Irish priest who was a missionary in the Philippines. He went through my master's program, and then he went back to the Philippines and started writing some short books on ecology and spirituality. Pope obviously read some of them and plucked them up and turned them around and said, write this for me. So I like to make this little story, it's good for young people to hear this, that for 34 years my work was called by two popes, quote, dangerous and deviant, unquote. And then this third pope is now plagiarizing it. I just want to point out to you young people, if you live a long enough life, you might be blessed as I have to live completed the whole circle. Just keep your sense of humor and keep your conscience, and you can't go wrong. But I'd like to begin with a few observations about your brilliant mystic, Swedenborg. Because I think he was both a mystic and a prophet. Rabbi Heschel, who wrote classic work on the prophets, defines the prophet's number one task as interfering. A prophet interferes. And I think all of us today have to be interfering. We have to be interfering with the demise of Mother Earth as we know her. But that interference must come from our mysticism. As William Hawking says, the early 20th century American philosopher, the mystic is a prophet in action. I mean, the prophet is the mystic in action. And that's what Swedenborg was. He was clearly a mystic, but he was also a prophet because he interfered. What was he interfering with in the 17th century? Well, the Enlightenment, says Yaroslav Pelikan, a Greek Orthodox theologian, the Enlightenment deposed the cosmic Christ and made the quest for the historical Jesus necessary. So I see in Swedenborg and any authentic mystic this awareness of the cosmic Christ, in the East called the Buddha nature, the holiness of all that is, the holiness of the universe. And well, during the Enlightenment period, Swedenborg stepped away from the everyday religious agenda that was becoming more and more anthropocentric, more and more narcissistic. He stepped out of that, and he tapped into a much greater vision. In addition, Theodore Roszak has said, the Enlightenment held mysticism up for ridicule as the worst offense against science and reason. Now, in the midst of this ridicule, Swedenborg dared to assert himself both as a scientist and as a religious person. So again, he did not succumb to the modern consciousness that was anti-mystical and forgetting of the cosmic Christ, which is, of course, the prime archetype of mysticism. I'll get into that later. And so Swedenborg was bucking both trends. And I think that has tremendous importance today, because both the fundamentalist wing of so-called Christianity, because I don't think it is Christianity, and the kind of left-wing version of Christianity tend to be ill at ease with the mystical. And that's why Swedenborg, he had his struggle with the Lutheran Church. And, he didn't want to start his own church, but on the other hand, he didn't want to succumb to the particular priorities of the Lutheran Church as it was, because he had a bigger vision. So I think in doing this, Swedenborg presents a marvelous example today, model of what we are about in growing up spiritually in this crisis time. Many people use the word apocalyptic today, that the news is apocalyptic. Every day there's more news about the disappearance of the insects, about the acidic, growing acidic dimension of the oceans, which is affecting the primal creatures in the oceans that indeed the bigger creatures feed on, etc. I mean, every day there's more news of how Mother Earth is suffering, or as I wrote about in my book on the Cosmic Christ, she's being crucified. It is the Christ being crucified all over again on the cross of human greed, indifference, and narcissism. And of course, a cross of the empires today, not unlike the empires that crucified Jesus. The empires of corporate power, of media contribution to that, and of course of certain politicians. So the fact that Swedenborg loved science, and as was pointed out, was a scientist before he was a theologian, That's awfully important. I wish every theologian was a scientist before they were a theologian. And that is very appealing to my tradition as a Dominican, because Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century said this. He said, a mistake about creation results in a mistake about God. Therefore, he spent his whole life bringing Aristotle, the best scientist of his day, into the Christian faith, and he paid a price for it. The fundamentalist priests, Augustinian-thinking priests, were so upset about his teaching and the fact that he was bringing Aristotle in. Who needs a scientist? Who needs a pagan scientist? Who needs a pagan scientist who's coming to us from Islam? All those objections to what Aquinas was doing. There were times when the King of France had to call his army out to surround the convent where Aquinas was living, because the parish priests were whipping up so much hatred of a theologian who dared to say that science and theology not only go together, they have to go together. Even this issue that is still splitting so many Christian denominations is crazy, homophobia. It's a question of science. Science has spoken. In the 1970s, how deep are churches' heads into the sand? 1970 was a long time ago. Some of you weren't born yet. When science came out and said, we've been wrong for a long time, that 8 to 10% of any given human population is going to be gay or lesbian, so get over it. And we've counted 464 other species that have gay and lesbian populations. So the fact that so many churches, like the Methodists, just a month or two ago, splitting over this question, it is a Galileo case of our time. Galileo case of our time. What the church did in the 17th century, hiding its head in the sand from Galileo's teaching, is what it's doing still. They haven't learned any lessons from this. So again, that's just one concrete example of what happens, what Aquinas said. If you don't listen to science, what is the nature? What is human nature? What is the diversity of sexuality and in so much else? So again, I see Swedenborg as a very important prophet and mystic for today, not just the 17th century. And the question isn't just what was he saying in the 17th century. The question is, what would he be saying in the 21st century? What science would he be reading today? And how would that affect his consciousness, his spirituality? And how would that mingle with his mysticism? Those are the questions that you who follow him need to consider. Now, this word apocalypse is coming up a lot. We're living in an apocalyptic time. But you know that the word apocalypse is a Greek word that can also be translated revelation. So I think we've got two things going here. Either this is an apocalyptic time we're living in, the end times, or it's an invitation from creation itself and the Creator to unveil, to reveal and unveil what human nature is really capable of. It's a moment of tremendous testing of the human species. And what is it we're really capable of? Well, Jesus taught it, the Buddha taught it, Muhammad taught it, Jeremiah and Isaiah taught it, Black Elk taught it. We are capable of compassion. We're capable of living this dance of interconnectivity, because that's the basis of compassion. And as was mentioned earlier, today science is on board with mysticism, that compassion is one of the habits of the universe. Well, compassion is a springboard. Interdependence is one of the habits of the universe. Therefore, compassion is a habit of the universe. Thomas Merton, Greek Catholic monk, 3 hours before he was murdered, and we now know he was assassinated by our government, a book came out this year called The Martyrdom of Thomas Merton, because he stood up against the Vietnam War and was training the American brothers and others to oppose the war. 3 hours before he was killed, he gave a talk called Karl Marx and Mysticism, and in it he said, compassion means the interdependence of all living things that are all part of one another and involved in one another. That was 1968. So he was appropriately defining compassion in this context of interconnectivity. There's wonderful marriage today then of the spiritual traditions of the world with the physics of the late 20th century. Demonstrates our potential, the revelation again of what our species is capable of. But it is a great moment to be alive, whether you're 18 or 88. It's a time for all hands on deck. We all have something to contribute to this shift that has to happen in the next 11 and a half years. And a big part of it is realizing the responsibility of digging deeper into what it means to be human. And that depth is something that all the spiritual teachers of the world have been coming to remind us of. So the Dalai Lama, a couple years ago, said, we can do away with all religion, but we can't do away with compassion. Compassion is my religion, he said. Well, to me that sounds an awful lot like Jesus in Luke chapter 6, be you compassionate as your Creator in heaven is compassionate. And it sounds like Muhammad, because in the Quran, by far the most often invoked adjective for Allah is Allah, the compassionate one. And in the Jewish tradition, of course, which is Jesus' tradition, compassion is the secret name for God. But Jesus let the secret out of the bag. Christians haven't always run with that secret. For many, it is still a secret. And yet the Dalai Lama said, in a talk to his monks 3 years ago, he said, we Buddhists are very good at meditating on compassion and talking about compassion. We should imitate the Christians more in practicing compassion. So I'm glad he's met a few good Christians along the way. The point, though, is that this is revelation, that we humans are capable of compassion. And that means, among other things, we have to be capable of taming the reptilian brain. You know, we've all got 3 brains. And the reptilian brain is the oldest, it's 420 million years old. So it wants to dominate. And by nature, reptiles want to dominate. They want to be number 1. If you ever get in a fight with a crocodile, it's win-lose. Not a lot of compromise there. So how do we become this reptilian brain? Our mammal brain, which is our compassionate brain, is exactly half as old as the reptilian brain. It's 210 million years old. This is why in both Hebrew and Arabic, the word for compassion comes from the word for womb. The womb people, the mammal people, we bring compassion in a special way to the planet. You've seen chimpanzees pick rice from their neighbors' necks and all that. That's compassion, caring for each other. Reptiles aren't real good for bonding and caring for each other. What they're really good at, though, is lying alone in the sun. Solitude. They're monks. They're monks. The word monk comes from the word monos, it means solitude. They're at home with being alone. And we have to find that monk in us if we're going to tame the reptilian brain. And that's what meditation does. You learn stillness. You learn to be at home with solitude. And in the process, you are petting your reptilian brain. Nice crocodile, nice crocodile. If we can make our reptilian brains happy, then the mammal brain, which is where our compassion especially resides, can assert itself. And revelation will happen. We will be less reptilian driven. And clearly reptilian energy is what's running the world today, and it has been for centuries. Mining everything we could mine, taking away from earth and giving nothing back, except sick rivers and sick soil and sick mountains where we've torn the top off to get at our greedy needs. So it seems to me that integral to this revelation of who we really are is our capacity to pay attention to all three of our brains. And of course, our most recent brain, the neocortex, is our intellect and our creativity. And currently they're being used mostly to feed the reptilian brain energy, I win, you lose. But to shift that energy to the mammal brain, I am your brother's keeper, I am your sister's keeper. That is one of the great spiritual challenges of our time. And that's what living interdependently and living compassionately means. Meister Eckhart, one of the great mystics of the West, says that compassion begins at home with one's own body and one's own soul. So this is where we learn our compassion, by treating ourselves with that same kind of respect. Now, I want to say a word about the Order of the Sacred Earth, because it was alluded to that I'm working with young people. And I had a dream 2 or 3 years ago. I know that your buddy Swedenborg had dreams, and a lot of people do. And of course, the Bible is riddled with people's dreams that changed history. This dream woke me up at 4 in the morning, and it said, "Do it," with 4 exclamation points and capital letters. Do it. 4 in the morning. What was the it that the dream was telling me? To start a new order, not a religious order, but a spiritual order. And I shared the dream with a young man who works with our Cosmic Mass. He's director of our Cosmic Mass, Scholar Wilson. He was about 31 at the time. And I told him about my dream. It turned out that week he had a dream too. And he found a big synergy between the 2 dreams. And his dream was that there are these groups of people at the beach in the Bay Area where he lives. And they were working and playing at the beach, and then they all started to meditate, started to levitate, and move over the city of San Francisco. So, together then, 3 of us, he and his girlfriend, Jen Mystic, and I, put out this book called Order of the Sacred Earth, an Intergenerational Vision of Love and Action. So Jen was 29 at the time, Skylar was 31, and I'm in my 70s. So it's intergenerational already. But here's the deal. It's not a religious order. That is, it is beholden to no religious headquarters or ideology. But it is an order, a spiritual order. And there's one vow that everyone takes. I promise to be the best lover of Mother Earth and the best defender of Mother Earth that I can be. So there you can see the rhythm in Swedenborg. The mystic is the lover, the prophet is the defender, the prophet or the warrior. And that's the one thing that binds us together. And we invite everybody from any spiritual tradition or none to join. Buddhists, Hindus, what have you, and atheists. So we had our first vow-taking ceremony last solstice a year ago in Berkeley in a Buddhist center. 80 people showed up. There were indigenous people, there were Jews, there were Christians, there were Buddhists, there were Hindus, and there's at least one atheist, a 20-year-old woman came out to me and she said, I'm looking for a community that shares my values. And I read about this, and she said, I'm on in. Oh, well, of course, you're welcome. And so we put out this book. The 3 of us have essays in the first half of it. The second half, we invited people to write a short 2-page essay about their vision, what this order might mean. And some of those people, you may recognize some of the names, Mirabai Starr, David Corton, Brian Simon, cosmologist, but some names you won't recognize because they're young people and aren't that well known yet. But I want to share with you just one response from Brian Swim, the cosmologist, to the idea of the Order of the Sacred Earth, because that's what we call it. Now, of course, he speaks and thinks as a cosmologist. And of course, for Swedenborg followers, this is your kind of thing. You're in science, our spiritual movement. He says, think about this. An individual hydrogen atom cannot transform itself into carbon, nitrogen, or phosphorus. An individual hydrogen atom will persist as it is without change for billions of years. At the most, it might disintegrate into an electron and a proton. It will never create anything new by itself. But the amazing fact is that if a hydrogen atom finds itself in the intense and interacting community called a star, it discovers that it has the power to participate in crucial ways in its transformation into the elements that give birth to life. In the community called a star, an individual atom becomes a gateway to the next era of the universe's story. This process whereby the universe constructs communities that ignite the contiguous members has been at work for 14 billion years, and I predict it will operate with the new intensity of an order of sacred earth. In other words, it's one thing to be alone facing the apocalyptic news that we face daily. It's another thing to be in a community with others. Being in a community doesn't mean you're living under the same roof, or it can be, but it means you're in touch with others, online and so forth. Now currently, we have, the book came out about 6 months ago, and we have, I think, about 2,500 people who've taken the vow that we know of, and about 45 pods. We call these communities pods. And the idea is that you create a pod where you are, in your bioregion, and you get together not only to take the ritual vow together, but to talk about what does it mean in practice? What do we do with this? In our area, how do we address the bio crisis, the eco crisis in our place and in our time? So it's just getting off the ground, but I think that it's very timely because, as you know, a lot of young people especially are not in church these days. I just came from Ireland, and I was told, now Ireland, 15 years ago, 95% of Catholics in Ireland were practicing. Today, 14% are practicing. It's astounding. And so, it's one thing to see people not in church, but it's another thing to say, to ask the question, is there an alternative form of community now developing that will do things differently and effectively, especially in this 11.5-year period, that can gin up our capacities of mysticism and warriorhood on behalf of compassion and justice. And that's why I see an order playing such an important role. When I look at the history of Christianity, there have always been times when Christianity has gone into a dive. But invariably, a new order comes to be. So in the 3rd century, the Christianity was beginning to I was going to say date the empire, flirt with the empire. And you had this movement of young people who said, well, this isn't the way I interpret Jesus' message. They fled to the desert. They left the cities where this was happening, went in the desert. We know them as desert fathers and mothers. And if you see pictures, they have long white beards. They weren't always old. They were young when they went to the desert, seeking a more authentic expression of the Christ story. That was 3rd century. 5th and 6th century, you had the Benedictine order launched by St. Benedict and his sister Scholastica. And of course, that order, the Benedictine order, really held a lot of culture together for centuries, from agriculture to scholarship to study, etc., to art and the rest. So that played a very important role. But in the 12th century, it went sour. It was far too married to the feudal system that was doing a very bad job of running politics and economics. And so it was going downhill with the feudal system to which it had married itself. And what did you have next then? St. Francis and St. Dominic, starting the Franciscan order, the Dominican order, which was really anti-monastic. They said that you can be both contemplative and active, and you should be in the cities where the people are, in the university where the young people are, etc. The new order. But then, you have the Reformation time, the 16th century. I interpret the Reformation as a series of new lay orders, All of them are responding to the corruption in Rome. But you have these different charismatic founders, whether Luther or Zwingli or Calvin or whoever, starting a new version of Christianity with their own theology, their own rituals, their own seminaries, and all the rest. Now today, and then of course 16th century, you also had St. Ignatius, who stayed within the Catholic Church, but his Jesuit order was a response to the corruption in Rome as well. Then you go up to today, and once again, there's no question, Christianity's in a dive, but what's happening? Except people leaving. So that's one reason why I think the idea of an order makes sense. It's kind of a halfway house between church as we know it and no community at all. But we also have to study the shadow side of these orders. And here's just one example. St. Francis. His order became very popular very fast because it was so timely. But what happened was, he did not want his brothers to be ordained priests. He felt that if you get into that hierarchical system, all kinds of bad things can happen. But the Vatican took his order away from him. And 2 years later he died. And I think he died of a broken heart. And 1 generation later, the Franciscans were running the Inquisition. So that's one of the lessons to learn. That an order is too big an idea to be turned over to a religious headquarters. That's why we need a spiritual order, not a religious order. And at this time in history, there are so many gifts being offered from all the world traditions that we have access to them. And so that Buddhists and Hindus and Christians and Jews and others would be working together to respond to this awakening, this revelatory moment that has to happen in the face of Gaia's crisis. This to me just makes all the sense in the world. We're already rubbing elbows with one another. Why not be sharing a common vision, that is, to love Earth more deeply and to defend her more fully? Now, Thomas Berry is one of the great eco-prophets of our time. He's not deceased. But he has an amazing passage. It's actually in his foreword to a book on Thomas Merton's Meditations on Nature. And he says this. He says, an absence of the sense of the sacred is a basic flaw in many of our efforts at ecologically, environmentally adjusting our human presence to the natural world. It has been said, we will not save what we do not love. It is also true that we will neither love nor save what we do not experience as sacred. I had a very powerful dream a number of years ago, and it said this to me. It said, there's nothing wrong with the human species today except one thing. Now, I bet if I asked you to pull out paper and pencil and give you 10 minutes, you could come up with 99 things that's wrong with the human species today. But the dream said there's only one thing wrong with our species. You have forgotten the sense of the sacred. That's what the dream said to me. We have forgotten the sense of the sacred. How do we bring a sense of the sacred back when it has been lost? Carl Jung talked about that. He said, today nothing is holy anymore. Nothing is holy anymore. How do we bring a sense of the sacred back? Well, Thomas Berry says it can only come back through a rediscovery of the numinosity of the universe itself. The cosmos itself is the ultimate sacrament, the ultimate sacred reality. And it has been birthing for 13.8 billion years, and it birthed our species over this very long period of laboring and gestation. So he thinks that that is the primary way to recover a sense of the sacred. And that takes us to the archetype of the cosmic Christ. The cosmic Christ. The whole cosmos as sacred, and every being in it as sacred. That is what the cosmic Christ means. John 1, that Christ is a light in every being. And now physics tells us there are light waves or photons in every atom in the universe. That's science and mysticism linking up. The sacredness of every being. Now, I wrote a book on the cosmic Christ 30 years ago. And about 10 years ago, a woman came up to me after a workshop and she said, I just love your book on the cosmic Christ. It changed my life. It brought me back to Christianity. And I love it so much, I read it twice. But she said, I have one question. I said, what's that? She said, what's the cosmic Christ? I've got 11 years to think about that. And the first thing I'd say is that every writer should have that experience once in their life. Not twice, but once. It's a wake-up call. But also thinking about it, I realized, it's a compliment. I take it as a compliment. Why? Because you can't define a mystical experience. William James says, one of the elements of mysticism is that it's ineffable. You can't talk about it. You can draw it, you can paint it, you can sing it, put it in poetry, but you really can't define it. Definition is an accomplishment of the left brain, but a mystical experience is the work of the right brain, or intuitions. And so I turned to a poet, Mary Oliver. How many of you know Mary Oliver? Great, one of the great mystics of our time. Her wonderful poem, At the River Clarion. It begins this way, I don't know who God is exactly. Well, that's a wonderful line. Too many theologians seem to know exactly who God is, and that scares the bejesus out of me. Jesus never told us exactly who God was, did he? She says, but I'll tell you this. Oh, she's going to tell us a story, just like Jesus did. That's how Jesus taught about God. He never defined God for us, did he? No. I was sitting in the river named Clarion on a water-splashed stone, and all afternoon I listened to the voices of the river talking. So we were asked to speak this evening about the voices of the earth. What did they say? Whenever the water struck the stone, it had something to say. And the water itself, and even the mosses trailing under the water. And slowly, very slowly, it became clear to me what they were saying. Said the river, I am part of holiness. And I too, said the stone. And I too whispered the moss beneath the water. So I wrote a 300-page book about the cosmic Christ. She has one-page poem, and she's nailed it. That's what the cosmic Christ is. It's a holiness in all beings. And they are talking to us, if you're listening. Native American once said to me, you know, trees talk. They talk to each other all the time. They talk to us if we only listen. The problem is, he says, so few white people listen. And this was already brought up by your president. The importance of listening. That's what contemplation is. It's listening. And to listen, you kind of have to learn some stillness. And here's how Mary Oliver puts it. She goes on in her poem. I've been to the river before a few times. Don't blame the river that nothing happened quickly. You don't hear such voices in an hour or a day. You don't hear them at all if selfhood has stuffed your ears. And it's difficult to hear anything anyway through all the traffic and ambition. So hearing, listening is a problem. That's where we have to go out of our way sometimes to learn to meditate, to learn to listen again in a deep way. And she says, if God exists, he isn't just churches and mathematics. He's the forest. He's the desert. He's the ice caps that are dying. He's the ghetto and the Museum of Fine Arts. He's Van Gogh and Allen Ginsberg and Robert Motherwell. He's the many desperate hands cleaning and preparing their weapons. He's every one of us potentially. The leaf of grass, the genius, the politician, the poet. And if this is true, isn't it something very important? If this is true, isn't it something very important? That we are all other Christs? That the universe is a Christ, and all the beings in it are, that we are all other Christs. That's the cosmic Christ. Thomas Burton, the Catholic monk whose monastery was near Louisville, tells a story how one time he was in the city of Louisville. He tried to get away from the monastery as often as he could for the city. Made up a lot of excuses. He had to see a doctor, had to see a therapist. But whenever he'd go there, he'd usually hang out in the black section to hear jazz. He'd go to this black club where there was jazz, and they're now interviewing these 80-something old black folks who were young people in the jazz clubs in Louisville years ago. And they said there was this weird white guy who would show up, he'd sit in the back, all he wanted to talk about was Zen, meditation, and jazz. That was Thomas Merton. But Merton says that one time at noontime, during rush hour at noon, in downtown Louisville, he was just crossing the street, Walnut Street, and all of a sudden he saw everybody lit up. The sun inside of everybody. S-U-N. And the next day he wrote in his journal, how is it possible to tell everyone they're all walking around shining like the sun? S-U-N. I'll tell you how. The cosmic Christ. That is exactly what the cosmic Christ is. That we are all shining from the inside out. And Merton puts it so wonderfully. Like, he was a poet and a wonderful, wonderful writer. And this is how he puts it. He says, we do not see the blinding one in black emptiness. He speaks to us gently in 10,000 things. He shines not on them, but from within them. The cosmic Christ is within us, not something outside of us, and within all beings. Now, science has established that trees and stones and rocks are giving off light and energy and colors on a regular basis. And there are some psychics who see this. One of them is this amazing Irish woman who's been seeing angels from the time she was 2 years old, Lorna Byrne, B-Y-R-N-E. Some of you know her. Go to her website, it's amazing. I had the privilege to interview her at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and 1,300 people showed up because they've been reading her stuff. An amazing story. She was illiterate. She still is illiterate. When she was 10, these angels appeared frequently, and when she was 10, one of them said, someday you're going to write books and be famous. And she laughed the angel out of the room because she couldn't read or write. It didn't make any sense to her. The angels told her, don't tell anyone what we told you until we tell you. And it was only when she was 65, after her husband died, that they said, okay, you can tell the world now. She's now dictated, she hasn't written because she doesn't write, she's dictated 3 books that have become international bestsellers. But one point she made to me was this. She said, well, 2 things. One is, I asked her about, because she mentions in one of these books about seeing the colors from trees and so on. I said, are you still seeing colors? Oh yeah, we were in this Gothic cathedral, there's Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. She said, from those stones, and she pointed at the big pillar, there are all these colors coming at us, all this energy coming at us. So she sees these things. And then she said also, there are a lot of unemployed angels in the world today. And this is about 5 years ago when the crash, Main Street was happening, and so forth. So my response said, oh no, I said, I know a lot of unemployed people. Do I have to put angels to work too? She said, no, this is what's happening. God knows how much trouble humans are in today, and is pouring angels on the earth to help us. No one's asking for help. So a lot of unemployed angels wandering around. So, when you go to bed tonight, ask the angels for help. But have a paper pencil, because they'll come at 3:30 in the morning and give you messages. But they don't respect our need for bodily sleep. But they want to help. Or if you will, in the morning when you get up, say a prayer in the 4 directions, calling in the angels from the 4 directions. So, they're smart. Aquinas says angels learn only by intuition. So they're on the highway of intuition. As you develop your mysticism more, which is your intuition, you're going to find angels hitchhiking on the highway of intuition. So they're eager to help. They don't need a lot of fancy stuff. Just they want to request that you want their wisdom, and we need all the help we can get today as a species. So call on them. But Thomas Merton has a very well developed theology of the cosmic Christ. And he compares it to Buddhism as well. He says, in Zen enlightenment, the discovery of the original face before you were born is the discovery not that one sees Buddha, but that one is Buddha. And then he says that for Christians, our original face is that Paul speaks of. He says, the attainment of the Buddha mind or Buddhahood is like the Christian expression, having the mind of Christ, or being of one spirit with Christ. He was united to the Lord as one spirit. All this is from the letter to Corinthians. This is the Catholic Christ then. And John Dominic Fossum, one of the great New Testament scholars of our day, wrote a big book on Paul. And there he says, for Paul, you cannot be a Christian without being a mystic. You cannot be a Christian without being a mystic. And the Catholic Christ tradition did not begin, it's not New Age, and it didn't begin with Teilhard de Chardin in the 20th century. It is in the earliest sources. It's in Paul, who wrote before the Gospels, and it's in the Gospel of Thomas that was written before the four Gospels. So the fact that we've lost the cosmic Christ is appalling. And it's one reason why Christianity in its current form is dying and deserves to die. But I think Swedenborg has the experience, as every authentic mystic does, like Paul. And this is what we need to recapture. And it has everything to do with Mary Oliver is saying. It's about the sacredness of the earth, the sacredness of the creatures of the earth. And this is what should inspire us to become the prophets and the warriors that we can become at this critical time in history. Here's how Mary Oliver puts it in some of her other poems. She says, glory to the world, that great teacher. Glory, doxa. That's the sign of the cosmic Christ. Because the cosmic Christ is that luminosity, that radiance that is in all beings, that science can detect, that some mystics can detect, but that we all can grasp. She says, I want to be in partnership with the universe. Let me keep company with those who say, look, and laugh in astonishment and bow their heads. Look, laugh in astonishment and bow their heads. Still, she says, what I want in my life is to be willing to be dazzled, to cast aside the weight of facts. Dazzlement, astonishment, all this is the mystical breakthrough, the experience of awe and of wonder. Rabbi Heschel says, wonder is the act of the mind confronting the universe. With today's science teachings, for example, from 2 summers ago, that the universe is not a few 100 million galaxies, but is 2 trillion galaxies big. How could we ever again be bored? How could we ever again not be dazzled, astonished, awestruck, with what Heschel calls radical amazement, to be part of this amazing universe, and to be a species that can find these things, that can discover these facts, and turn them into moments of praise and celebration and gratitude, because that is what changes the human heart. Yes, it is true that sorrow also changes the human heart, but awe is the beginning of wisdom, according to the Jewish tradition. Awe is the beginning of wisdom. So too is sorrow. Sorrow rattles our cages, wakes us up. The sorrow that the earth is going through with all of her creatures today, the elephants, the tigers, the waters, the soil, the rainforest, the forest, all that which is we're feeling in a negative way now with climate change. All that is meant to wake us up too. So we go through a breakthrough time. Meister Eckhart says, if you want the kernel, you must break the shell. A lot of our shells have to be broken today. The shell of species narcissism, and many other shells. Shells of racism, shells of sexism, shells of homophobia. That's why we're undergoing this dark night of our species, because that's what it is. It's not just the dark night of the soul. It's a dark night of our species. And we must learn from what the mystics teach us about the dark night. That it's a powerful place to be. It's a place to learn things we don't learn in the light. But the tendency, the action, reaction, response to the dark night is to run, to get a drink, to buy, go shopping. There's a wonderful teaching from Humphreys, 14th century mystic, who was a contemporary of Meister Eckhart. He says, sometimes God wants to do us a great favor, turn us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. But most everyone I know, he says, who encounters God in such a playful, drunken mood, quickly packs their bags and hightails it out of town. That is a story of the dark night of the soul and the dark night of our species. Our first response is to get out of town, and that's normal. But the mystic in you, the prophet in you, the warrior in you sticks around, because there's something powerful to learn about this crisis we're in as a species, about this apocalyptic moment that can be converted into a revelatory reinvention of the human species that is absolutely essential for our right to remain on this planet. And healthy religion, healthy mysticism should be inspiring us, lending us the courage and the imagination to make that happen. Now I want to share with you something that Albert Einstein taught us. He talks about he says we're entering a third era of religion. We are now moving to the third phase of religious experience, cosmic religion. That's his name for it, cosmic religion. These are his words. With his growing knowledge of the vastness of the universe and its trillions of stars, each one many times larger than our planet, you know, the sun, our star, can hold 1 million Earths. That's how big it is. It's kind of a big idea. And remember, he told that there are 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. And the sun isn't the biggest star, it's kind of a medium-sized star. Do you know what that means? 2 scientists have told me this. There are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of the earth. Yes. Think of that next time you're on a beach. Pick up 1 grain of sand and meditate on it for 5 years. Let it talk to you. You know, some people think you have to have the Bible talk to you. Well, that's good. The Bible talks to us. But every being talks to us. Meister Eckhart says every creature is a word of God and a book about God. So today, with Mother Earth suffering so much and offering so much beauty and health, we have to be listening deeply to what this Word of God is telling us. This Logos, this cosmic Christ who is being crucified all over again. And of course that means listening to the scientists who are telling us how the earth is hurting. Here's Einstein. Each one many times larger than our planet, stars whose light takes hundreds of years to reach our eyes, humans must consider it an insult when we are told that our conduct should be motivated by fear of punishment or hope of reward. Well, this is what Meister Eckhart says. We must learn to live without a why, W-H-Y, and to love without a why, and to work without a why. And the Buddhists say the same thing. Here's Einstein. It is just as much an insult to God, who created all these marvels, to be lowered to a human level. The true religious genius has always been endowed with a sense of cosmic religion. This oneness of creation, to my sense, is God. The oneness of creation is God. But that's exactly what a mystical experience is. It's an experience of the oneness of all beings. This concept of God will unite all nations. A new age of peace will be inaugurated when all people profess a cosmic religion, when the youth have become lay people with scientific minds. So he predicted that this awakening of our species, a lot of it will come through the young. And it will not be in competition with science, it will be along with science. And I think this is very much a Swedenborg insight as well. Now let me say a few words about intergenerational wisdom, and then I'll stop and have some discussion. The youth today are in a very special place. There's never been a generation that has faced the apocalypse, an earth apocalypse, like this generation is facing. Yes, there have been tribes, moments in our histories, of course, and our whole tribe was facing its demise, its extinction. We have this new movement called Extinction Rebellion. I just love that name. Is there anyone here who would not rebel against their extinction? Raise your hand. Is there anyone here who would not rebel against the extinction of tigers, or elephants, or whales? You know, whales have been here 56 million years longer than we have. 56 million years longer, and they have not invented nuclear weapons. What's wrong with them? Are they dumb? What's wrong with us? What's wrong with us? So, I wrote a book a few years ago with Adam Buckler, a wonderful young man who worked for 15 years in New York City with homeless young adults and did marvelous work in doing so, amazing results. Teaching them to meditate and all this good stuff, but also tap into their creativity, finding jobs, all that good stuff. Well, we wrote this book called Occupy Spirituality, and it's about a new vision from young people. So we define young adults 21 to 33. And we put out this questionnaire around the country for young adults. And one of the questions we asked was this: what's your relationship with elders? 97% said, we're looking for elders and can not find them. That's very important information, especially if you're an elder. Too many elders in our country have bought into this nonsense from our culture that retirement is an honorable word. It's not. It's an obscene word. We should throw the word retirement right out the window. When the time comes in your life when you no longer have to put food on the table for the younger generation, or you no longer have to be married to an institution to get a paycheck, rejoice, celebrate, take a weekend off or something. But then the next question is refirement and rewirement. What is the fire in your belly? What is it calling you to do, to give back? And become more aware of how your brain is being rewired when you no longer have to commit yourself to that daily paycheck. So we should replace retirement with refirement and rewirement, because as we get older, we get rewired. And you know why? Because we're facing death. And what's really important comes back. And what's really important is mysticism, beauty, curiosity that we had when we were children, in love with discovering our toes and our fingers, and being here, realizing what a privilege it is to be here. And so eldership has to be rediscovered in the West. We need, for example, rituals of eldership. Of course, we need rituals of rites of passage for our young too, but we need rites of passage for elders. And these should be created with young people. The young people can help the elders to create rites of passage. And then it's a mutual interaction. We did that to create spiritual communities a few summers ago. It's really powerful. And here's a scientific story that's really important. A few years ago, a woman anthropologist set out to answer one question. Why did the Neanderthals die out and the Homo sapiens are still hanging around? Now, the traditional patriarchal version of anthropology said, well, we beat them all up in wars. We just beat them all up in wars. We're so good at that. But now we found DNA of Neanderthal in a lot of us. So we weren't just making more with the Neanderthal. And that theory's out the window. This is what she found. She had a team of others working on this with her. she found that Neanderthals tended to die around the age of 40 or 41. There were no grandparents. There were no elders. Our ancestors lived into their 50s. There were 3 generations, not 2. That's the difference. So being an elder is not patronizing you because you got white hair, because you've endured for so many decades. Don't buy into that patronizing nonsense. Being an elder is a necessity for our species to survive. And elders are not responding to that necessity. The young can't even find us. Too busy on the golf course or playing the stock market or some stupid adolescent games. The number one thing you will find when you ask your conscience about the fire inside is going to be something like this: to work with the youngest generation. There is that special relationship between the grandparents and the grandchildren. That's what we're talking about, intergenerational wisdom. And it's not a one-sided thing at all. It's a give and take. We learn from the young. We learn hope from the young. We learn fun from the young. We learn vision from the young, and courage from the young, and playfulness. And the young has something to learn from us. Now, one of the points made in our questionnaire was this. They said, the few elders that we find, they talk too much. So that should be memorized too. Elders should know that your first job today is to listen. Because the young are facing untold apocalyptic stories. Many, as you know, asking the question, dare I bring children into the world, etc., etc. So first we need to listen. There will be time to respond and to tell our stories. But the first act of eldering today is to be a good listener. Remember that every person is a word of God, a logos, a Bible speaking to us. And that's the cosmic Christ. That kind of reverence, that kind of open heart and open ears that we need to give to one another. And so there is this marvelous invitation today of intergenerational wisdom. No generation is going to solve our problems today, just like no religion is going to solve them. We need all the help we can get. And no species is going to solve it. We need the help of the angels. And we need the help of the four-legged ones and the others who are teaching us things in our dreams and beyond. So, let me close with a quick story about a wonderful eco-martyr of our time. She was a student of mine, Sister Dorothy Stain. Have you heard of her? She's from the Midwest, from Ohio. And she was a sister in the order of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur. And she was a missionary in the Amazon for 42 years. And she was martyred in the Amazon because she was working with the peasant farmers. And she said that they have a sacrosanct right. She says, and she knew her life is in danger. She came to my program, our master's program in spirituality, and then she went back again. And she was told by her family, many of her order, don't go back, it's dangerous, you become a leader, you're a target. But this is what she said. She said, I don't want to flee, nor do I want to abandon the battle of these farmers who live without any protection in the forest. They have the sacrosanct right to aspire to a better life on land where they can live and work with dignity while respecting the environment. The death of the forest is the end of our lives. So she returned, and within 2 years, she was gunned down by 4 hired hands. She was walking alone on a dirt road in the jungle, and these 4 guys came out with machine guns from the forest. And she had just enough time to pull out her Bible from her backpack. She opened it to the Beatitudes, and they gunned her down when she was reciting those Beatitudes. But I mentioned her because she's a woman of courage. And if we think we're going to be prophets and warriors, mystics in action, without building our courage, we are mistaken. Gandhi said, if you're going to do real work, you must prepare yourself for mountains of suffering. Now, courage is 2 French words for a big heart. What grows the heart? Joy grows the heart. Joy grows the heart. So she became more and more joyful in our program. doing artist meditation, doing dancers meditation. She went back to the forest in the Amazon, and we have all kinds of stories how she was leading women's dances in the middle of the forest at midnight and all this stuff. She became more and more joyful, and that fed her courage. Because joy and justice go together. Joy and justice go together. They are kin, they are brother and sister. I started a thing on Mother's Day called Daily Meditations with Matthew Fox. It's free. Go online, Daily Meditations. And just today, she's on my mind, because just today, our daily meditation was about her story. And in that are some paintings that she painted when she went back to the Amazon. And because she learned that painting is meditation. That all meditation is not about sitting. All meditation is not about introvert meditation. Artist meditation is important for the prophets. In fact, it's the way of the prophets. All the prophets were poets, or wine growers in the wealth and the rest. As Rabbi Hush says, the prophets were passionate people, and they put their passion into creativity. They put their passion into creating alternative versions of moral imagination. That's what all of us have to do today. As prophets and as mystics, that is our invitation. So let me stop there. I hope there's been something here to stir your memory of the wisdom and the courage of Swedenborg himself, who had the courage to step out of organized religion and of science that ignored the mystical. He was, in a way, a rebel in both camps. I like rebels. I think making trouble is one reason we're here. And I hope that all of you make trouble too, just like your brother in Sweden. Thank you.